I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Start off tonight by seeing if there's any public comment from the board.
Yes.
Luck.
Yes, the pancake breakfast, which is the second Wednesday of every month at the Eagle House Center, is going to be tomorrow from 8 to 11. All the pancakes and sausages you want for $2. It's
Wow.
a great deal. I also wanted to mention that Lunenburg is a contributing member of the Central Mass Mosquito Control Project. And because of that, Lunenburg residents can get rid of used tires. You call them up and you can have up to 10 tires curbside and they'll pick them up. The reason they do this is because from one tire, tens of thousands of mosquitoes can be born every year. So you don't want old tires hanging around. So they'll pick them up for nothing. You just have to give them a call, and there's one day a week that they're in our area, and they'll just pick them up at your curb. Car and light truck tires.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, just to expand on the services of Central Mass Mosquito Control, if you're interested in having your property sprayed, you can contact them via their website. You can fill out an online form and they will come out and treat your property. They will look to see if there's any mosquito brooding and give you some recommendations, and they'll spray. So, and likewise, if you don't want your property treated or that area, actually it's just, it used to be they would spray streets. Now they just do individual properties. So if you're interested in having your property looked at, give them a call and they will set up an appointment.
And again, that's at no charge
That is free.
because the town pays for it.
Right.
Anybody else? A couple of announcements. First of all, this Saturday, May 16th, is Election Day in town. So polls open 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the TC Passio School in the cafeteria where we always have Election Day. Actually, not the cafeteria, the gym, I guess. So that is that. We will be having a Memorial Day ceremony on Memorial Day, which is on May 25th, Monday, May 25th at 11 a.m. at Veterans Memorial Park. I'm glad, and thanks to Mr. Toll for heading up putting that ceremony together, and we hope to pick up again where we left off, because we missed last year, and person who usually did it was no longer with the board, and we didn't pick up the slack, and we promised we would, so we are back on schedule with Memorial Day ceremonies. And it's always nice to see all the veterans come out, and we have a lot of them that come out in town. And lastly, just a reminder, I don't usually, do teasers for selectmen meetings, but I know a lot of people are interested that the Water District Commissioners are going to be here next week to meet with the selectmen at 7 p.m. at the beginning of the meeting. So anybody interested in learning about the Water District and from the commissioners themselves, please plan on watching or attending.
Actually, the Water District is meeting tomorrow night to discuss that. Their regularly scheduled meeting has that as an agenda item.
They're meeting here?
No,
No,
they're
at the
meeting
Water
at their regularly scheduled
Right.
meeting. The Lancaster expansion is on the agenda.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't actually mention Lancaster expansion, but good. So yes, I'm assuming that'll be a big topic of our conversation with them as well. Okay, 7 p.m. We have a liquor license transfer hearing. I'm guessing these two gentlemen in the front are the transferee and transferent, or so. Just to make it official, since this is a public hearing, as posted in the Lunenburg Ledger of, do we have the, just to be official, May 1st. The Lunenburg Licensing Authority will hold a public hearing on May 12th, 2015 at 7 p.m. in Town Hall, Joseph Bellata Meeting Room, second floor, 17 Main Street, Lunenburg, on the application submitted by Sarjudas LLC for a transfer of an all-alcoholic package store license from Vasta Inc., doing business as Lunenburg Liquors, located at 433 Electric Avenue in Lunenburg, Mass. The premises are described as a one-story building with one entrance and exit, side entrance for deliveries, and one room for sales and display. One storage room and cellar used for storage, addition used for storage, and having a separate entry and exit. Tom Alonso, Chairman, Board of Selectmen Licensing Authority. We have all the applications and forms before us. Whoever is getting or either giving or receiving, if you would like to come up to the microphone, please, and just introduce yourself.
I, Jasmine Kumar Patel, residence of 47 Princeton Street, Building 2, Apartment 309, Leominster, is a principal owner of Sarjudas LLC, and Christopher Diaz is the manager of Sarjudas LLC. So I'm requesting the liquor license transfer from Vasta Inc. to Sarjudas LLC.
Any changes in the business planned?
No.
No change in hours, no change in...
Same, yeah. All the nature of business will remain same.
Okay. Even the name, or are you going to be... Is it going to
Yes, I'm going to use the Lunenburg Liquor name.
Okay.
DBA name should...
So aside from this form transfer, people who go there won't know any difference?
No.
Okay. All the forms and all the application fees are paid and filled out?
That is correct.
Any questions from the board?
I'm just looking for Vasta Inc. I'm looking for their signature and they're not present, so can you just point from in the packet where they signed this transfer?
I think there's a copy of the purchase and sales.
There should
Maybe
be
is in the
one
file.
form
There it is
that's
right
signed
here.
by
Right.
Stacy.
Okay.
That's the form.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
If there are no questions, I would entertain a motion on the application of the license transfer.
I would make a motion to transfer the all-alcoholic package store license of Lunenburg Liquors to Sarjudas LLC.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Good luck.
Thank you.
Just you on that one.
Okay, we're going to jump down to appointments, and we have the appointments of 3 reserve police officers. I will ask the chief to come up and introduce the choices for these reserve police officers. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. And through you, I'm here in front of you tonight to request the appointment of 3 individuals who I'll describe in a second. But I'd like to tell you first that all 3 of these candidates have successfully completed the Municipal Police Training Committee's 315-hour Reserve Intermittent Police Academy. They passed the required the physical agility test, and a background test. Something that we've done a little differently, we've taken our policy a step further, and what we've done in the recent past is we've invited candidates who are attending the police academies to come in and work as interns. And they do this on their own time. They volunteer this time. And these 3 candidates have done numerous hours as interns before this evening. They will, however, undergo field training with a minimum, according to our policy, of 250 hours of field training, if that is necessary. If it's necessary to go on beyond that number of hours, then that'll happen as well. But these are 3 very strong candidates, and I'll introduce Chad Stadler, Dan Minicello, and Zach Bellotta. Chad has earned an associate's degree at the Associate's of Science degree in Criminal Justice and Law Enforcement at Massachusetts Community College, Bachelor of Science degree, Criminal Justice at Fitchburg State, where he graduated cum laude. He, as I said, he's an intern at the Lunenburg Police Department presently. He was an intern at the Shirley Police Department while going through college, and he's currently employed as a loss prevention specialist with the J.C. Penney Company. Dan Minicello has earned an Associate's of Science degree, Massachusetts Community College. He too was an intern with the Lunenburg Police Department, and he's currently employed as a full-time dispatcher at the Fitchburg Police Department. And Zach Bellotta has earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice and a Bachelor of Sociology at Westfield State University. He too is an intern at Lunenburg PD. He was a security officer at Westfield State University, and he's currently employed by Hannaford Supermarkets as a shift leader. And I'd ask all 3 of you to step up here. Very, very capable candidates. This is Chad Stadler, Zach Bellotta, and Dan Minicello.
Good evening. Good evening. Anybody like to say anything? Of course, thank you for your selections here, and this is your appointment, correct?
These are my appointments and up for your ratification.
I have a question. How long will the 250 hours of volunteer work consume? You know, when will they be ready?
Tomorrow, I'm hoping. However, that could take up to 6 months. Sometimes it takes a year. They have full-time jobs, so we have to rely on them to come in, you know, on their off time. Preferably, we'd like to do it in 3 to 6 months. I've seen it take up to a year, depending on
How much time they have available?
full-time job status, exactly.
And then they will be able to work once that 250 hours has been successfully completed?
That's correct. And what we'll do is we'll credit them with all the hours they worked as interns as training hours, because they actually do go out in the police cars, they write reports, they pretty much do what the police do. They just don't carry guns and don't wear uniforms. We do obviously outfit them with body armor before they go out there. So we do credit them with training time. So it helps, it gives them a head start.
So they have a leg up on, because of their interning. They have some hours already under their belt.
That's correct. Yeah.
Great.
I want to thank you for, I like the way that you've tried different methodologies to get people so when they're ready, when they come here, that they're ready, and should they ever get change from reserve officer to full-time officer, that they're ready, and to get people while they're in, the training, the other training, to work here. I think it was a great idea. So thank you for always looking for different avenues to really make the transition, to get the best candidates and to make the transition for those candidates should they choose to do it here or elsewhere, to make that a good transition. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the
And
kind.
did you mention that they pay for their own uniforms, too?
The reserve intermittent officers have to pay for their own uniforms and equipment, notwithstanding the guns and the clips and the ammunition. But they do pay for their own uniforms. The union employees, the full-time employees, have a uniform allowance. But they too are issued guns and so forth. But the uniform parts, they pay for through their allowance. I'd also like to acknowledge them for all of the grunt work that they did while they worked as interns, because they did wash cars and they did do some record keeping and so on and so forth, and trash pickup. So
The glamour jobs.
You saw our car wash bill go down a little bit, that's probably why. Yeah, it's the glamorous piece of the job, so
Was a test or something?
that's a test. That was a test.
Well, Lunenburg does have clean police cars. I have noticed that.
Well, in some cases.
No, luckily.
More importantly, they have an excellent police force, so.
Thanks for saying that.
I would entertain a motion on ratifying the town manager's appointment of the 3 officers appearing before us. I won't go through all their names again.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Congratulations and good luck in Lunenburg.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
I would, I'd just like to mention too, so going forward, it's no surprise, we've lost about 6 officers to resign, a couple resigned, some retirements. I have one that may be going to the Fitchburg Police Department because he's on the list and he did receive a card. And one I don't want to lose, but I really will have no choice. So I will be looking to put on a few more part-time people in the near future. And I just want some food for thought that I might be in front of you
The
again.
people you lost are reserve officers? or-
Yeah, these are all reserve officers. And, I anticipate losing, we have really good candidates, and they're looking for full-time jobs. So I can't help that. So, just so you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
$7:15, almost right on time. We have Chief Sullivan to go over the EMTI to advance the transition for the ambulance service.
Good evening.
Punctuation is everything.
Just basically a quick summary of what this is there's been a change in the state law that within the next 2 years will require us to make a change on our ambulance license. Just to give you some background right now, there's really 4 levels of ambulance service in the state. Basic life support, a BLS, which is CPR, oxygen, backboarding, basic patient care, EpiPens, care like that. Intermediate level, which adds in additional training for some EMTs that they can do intravenous fluids, they can do advanced airway maneuvers, endotracheal tubes, things like that. Paramedic level, which I think everybody's familiar with, a lot more training involved there. Cardiac monitoring, a lot of medications, much more advanced skill. And then finally, the final level is critical care, which is even above and beyond that. And that's really like your life flight helicopters, things like that. Our service currently is licensed at the EMT intermediate level. So we have 8 advanced level responders, 4 intermediates, and 4 paramedics that can operate at that level. The state has decided to, in 2012, is adopting some national standards for EMS. The standards that we've used they were adapted from the national many years ago, and Massachusetts has kind of done their own. Now they're going with the national standard. As part of that, the EMT intermediate level is going away. The standard that Massachusetts follows actually goes back to 1985 that they used for the intermediate. Intermediate was originally designed more for trauma care in areas that were either unserved or underserved by paramedic level units. And what's happened over time is they found the patient care has gone, not that we don't have trauma, but it's gone more to care of chronically ill patients, things like that, more medical. So what they've come up with as part of this transition is the national level has what is known as the advanced level, and Massachusetts is adopting that. So again, for the last 15 years, we've operated under the intermediate level. So we have to make a decision as to whether we're gonna transition to that new level or have to take a step back. Basically, as of April 2013, the state wasn't licensing any new intermediates. They're only training people to this new advanced level. By March of 2016 or 2017, depending on their recertification cycle, any of the existing EMT intermediates have to either go through the upgraded training, which is somewhat involved, or take a step back down to being a basic EMT. And by April of 2017, we have to either move the license forward, become the advanced level, which means we have to get a little bit of equipment, which I'll describe, and we have to make sure we have properly trained personnel for that. Or we transition back to just a basic life support ambulance, which I don't recommend. Basically, expense-wise, to do this, I've looked at the total high-end cost would be about $6,700, which by my indications, we can absorb over, if we do it over 2 years, out of the budget, out of donation funds, things like that. About $3,000 of that is additional equipment. To go to this level, we already have probably 2/3 of the equipment because we are already operating at the intermediate level. There is some new equipment to add. I based that number on $3,000. Right now, it actually may be a little bit less because some of the equipment, it sounds like the state may not require us to carry. So that may drop that a little bit. The other cost isn't, and again, the state has not come out with a medication list that we would have to carry. Basing on what the skills are for that level and what a paramedic unit would have to carry, we're looking at about $1,700 in initial medication costs to stock that. If one particular medication isn't required, it's going to drop that cost under $200. And then I also budgeted in approximately $500 per intermediate. That's about the going cost to pay for the program that they have to go through to transition. As all EMS providers have said to sort of transition to this national standard. For basic EMTs and for paramedics, it hasn't really been, it's been a pretty seamless transition. There's not really a lot of work involved, not a lot of re-education. For an intermediate to go to the advanced level, because they've added so much to it and revamped the program, because again, we're based off a 30-year-old program in this state, it's about a 120-hour program for them to go through, and they have to retest for that, both on a written and a practical. The programs that we've seen so far for the transition are running around $500 a student, so I sort of have planned in there to transition our 4 intermediates. At this point, all 4 have indicated that they are interested in going through that training and moving on to the advanced level. What we gain out of that is several skills that the advanced or the intermediate EMTs didn't have prior to. They have some different options for fluid resuscitation. For pediatric patients, they can actually do what they call an intraosseous IV, which is actually using a device to drill into the bone and provide fluid right into the bone marrow and that. They can provide some new medications, such as nitroglycerin for cardiac patients, Duoneb or albuterol inhaler medications for asthmatics or respiratory people. Not all of that is available to us currently. Solutions for diabetics that we can give, that they can give intravenously, IV sugar or glucagon injectors. That sounds like that will be available to us as well. And some other options for advanced airways. Again, these people would have the same trauma care abilities that they would have previously, but it also gains them some new skills for medical-based problems, and a lot more skill in more advanced patient assessment and dealing with chronically ill patients. Plus, they would also have some skills that we already currently have with the service, which are optional for us, but would be required at that level, which is the nasal Narcan and the use of glucometers for monitoring blood sugar. We already have that level. So again, these people this doesn't take the place of a paramedic level service. We'd still be using a mutual aid paramedic for a lot of our calls, but these people would be able to assist them even more than they do currently. And there would be some few opportunities, not a huge amount, that there might be some calls that we'd be able to do on our own and not need the paramedic level and that. Not a huge difference in revenue that we'd be keeping all of it. I just look at it as would be an improved level of care. We could get that to our citizens that much quicker. The ongoing expenses for this would probably primarily be cost of replacement medications, and until we really know how much we're going to be going through them, I really don't have a good number on that yet. Again, the alternative would be to drop back to the BLS level, which would leave us with a few $1,000s of equipment that we have now that would be unusable. And it would probably see a slight decrease in revenue, only because we'd be utilizing out-of-town paramedics even more and paying for their services. So again, to me, this isn't a money issue. This is more of being able to take our service, if it's here, bring it up a little bit more and sort of maintain what we've got with some added skills to go along with it. To my way of thinking, not a huge, amount of money to invest into that to get us a little bit better level of care. So again, that's sort of been my feeling, is to move in that direction. Right now, we're sort of waiting on the state to come out with the final requirements of what we need to do to transition the service to do this. And as usual, the state will probably come out with it 2 days before the deadline. Not that I'm pessimistic or anything.
No, I didn't think it was pessimism. I thought it was
It's called
satire / sarcasm.
It's called experience.
I started laughing because those kind of comments are right in my wheelhouse. So I won't ask anybody if they have any questions for the chief. Sure. Mrs. Bertram.
I think it absolutely makes sense. I mean, having more skills on the ambulance absolutely makes sense. And going backwards, to me, just isn't an option. So one of the questions I have, you just alluded to it, you don't know when the state's going to come up with the final requirements.
Right.
But if we need to transition, 4 people with 120 hours of program education, how do you see that working as far as the existing ambulance service? What's the timeline?
Once they go through the training program, if the service hasn't transitioned yet, they can still operate at the intermediate level. But from everything I understand, is for us to apply to move the license to that level, I have to have the people trained.
Okay.
I have to be able to say I've got the people, sufficient people to be able to perform the skills. And like, some of my people, they're going to, their certification cycle is going to be up in 2016. Some are going to be up in 2017, depending on how it goes. So some of them have less than a year to get done, to go through that training. Some have 2 years. I'm not sure exactly which ones fall in what cycle right now. I know at least one has to basically get everything done this year.
Okay.
And again, the paramedics, it's a little different. I have 4 paramedics that run in the department. They can't do their full paramedic skills because they can only operate at the level that the service is licensed to. They have to go through their own training too, but it's nowhere near as involved as this. It'll be taken care of as part of their annual refresher training that we do every year. Same as it was for the basic EMTs.
Okay, so you would see starting that training process for the people whose certification is coming up this year, and then the additional the following.
They're looking at classes right now. Unfortunately, there's not that many of the transition classes available, but they're looking at that right now. So, and I'm certainly encouraging them as to the best of my ability that I can at least try to cover the tuition for them, because they're going to, again, invest quite a bit of time on their own time to go do this.
Right.
So
just so I'm clear, I just want to make sure, if you were given your own timeline, if you could start immediately, which it sounds like you're already planning, when would all those people who are currently on intermediate be on the advanced? When would they be trained by?
who do you know what the cycles are on the others? I know Kenny is this year.
3 that are this year.
Okay.
And 1 that's 17.
Okay, so basically I would probably need primarily to get 3 people done this year. They've got to transition, they've got to go through the training by March 31st of 2016.
So when they're ready to be recertified?
Yeah, they've got to get that, they've got to go through that training and have that done prior to March 31st. Your research date's April 1st.
Okay.
And then 1, plus the paramedics will still have that ability.
So
and then for me, it's an investment in starting to buy some of the equipment. And then once the state finalizes the equipment list, because even after I wrote this, then they came up with a different one that is actually a little bit cheaper than what I was looking at.
So did you say you have 4 paramedics on duty already?
No, I have 4 paramedics in the department. 1 full-time, Karen, and then I have 3 on-call paramedics that are all full-time. One's actually on a maternity leave, she's a nurse, and the other 2 are full-time firefighters in another town. So I have them available when they're available. They're not full-time staff. 2 of my full-time staff are intermediates that will be looking at transitioning, and I have 2 call firefighters or EMTs that are intermediates.
How involved is it for them to move from advanced to paramedics?
Paramedic, even going for that, you're talking about another year of school. It's like 2,000 hours. It's a significant jump to go to that.
Yeah, it's definitely a significant skill difference too.
It's a lot more training, a lot more field time. Paramedic's about 2,000 hours worth of training versus this is probably 500 hours.
In advance, in addition to if advanced, right?
To go beyond that. There's a few bridge programs that would go from advanced to medic, but you're still talking the better part of a year. And a lot of that's full-time school. That's not part-time. This would be like a part-time thing, go nights here and there. Paramedics pretty much a year of full-time commitment for that. And then even to transition the service to paramedic level is a lot more cost involved far more than beyond this. So.
Well, I would say that in echoing Mrs. Bertram, I don't see that there's even really, aside from a paper option to go down, it makes no sense. to do
Right.
that.
It's sort of my feeling is,
So
you know,
I
it's,
certainly
I'm
want-
not going to be coming up to ask for a lot more money to make this happen.
Right.
And that I don't need any more people, I just need to transition
And
a
as you
handful.
said, it's not, I mean, of course, everything at some point has a money element,
Right.
but it's not a money decision.
Right.
In this case.
The return on investment is pretty good
Right.
for what we're investing in this. So, and eventually, even if we went to the paramedic level, you'd still use all this equipment. It wouldn't be like you'd be throwing it away.
Right.
Right.
So,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh.
That was my question, is there a long-range strategy to go to the paramedic level?
I would like to go that way. The big challenge for paramedic is staffing. The state generally requires, if you're an ALS provider, you have to be able to provide it 24/7. Intermediate, they're a little more flexible. Paramedic, within 3 years, you have to guarantee pretty much a paramedic all the time. There's a couple towns that were doing it on a call basis. Ashburnham almost lost their license because they weren't able to provide that paramedic. Now they have somebody on shift 24/7 to provide that level of care. The state's much stricter on having that, and a lot of calls, they say you have to have 2 paramedics. So usually you have to have, even if you have one, you have to have an option to be able to call one from another service or recall one of your own people. So to me, the big number there is staffing. You need to do it on a call basis. There's a couple towns that do it. They're struggling. Sterling was doing it. Sterling just hired 2 more full-time guys. They're going to 24-hour coverage. Townsend is doing it with per diem people. They do it most of the time. They're having trouble covering the truck and that. So it's tough. And then there's probably, again, about an investment of roughly $30,000 per vehicle for cardiac monitors, other equipment, medications, and I'm pulling that number kind of out of the air, but I know roughly about where that's at. Again, I would love to do it, but the big thing is having the people to do it. Having 4 on-call medics, it sounds good, but when they work in their other shifts, the time that they're actually around is tough. You can't guarantee that you're going to have one around all the time.
When they required 2 paramedics on a call, if you had one in-house, they could get there first, right?
You could respond with it. Generally, you have to call, get one from, they look for you to get one from another location. Can you run with 1 medic on shift? Yes, you could run with a medic and a basic. There's some rules on how you do that, the experience level of the medic. They don't want to take a brand-new paramedic and you're on your own.
Yeah, right.
There's rules for that. So there's some things to look at there. I mean, long-term, I would love to look at it, but again, like everything else, it comes down to money and having the people available to do it.
I support this. The only question is, are there any collective bargaining requirements that would be affected by this?
Yes, there are. This would be subject to collective bargaining. There would be issues, relative to increased stipends for an increased level of training. So we did, I'm the one who, I asked the chief to come and present this to you because we're, within 2 years of having to implement this. I am supportive of this. I think this is a great thing to do. It's not a lot of money to go up to the additional level of service, but in addition to what the chief has mentioned, there are increased personnel costs. So we wanted to make sure you were aware of this and not surprised by this, that it would be our intention to move to this level of service. But but there are costs associated with it.
And when do you, I mean, I'm assuming you can kind of run some scenarios of what those costs would be and when they would hit. I mean, is that your intent, is to bring that back? Or?
Well, we are working with the firefighters union. We, the Labor Council has been to you once or twice on that contract. This is something that has come up, without getting into too much detail.
Right.
The next time we meet, we will talk about that.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Chief.
Are you looking for a motion?
If you would like to make one in support of this transition, that would be good.
So moved?
Second?
I think, I agree with it conceptually, and I think it makes sense, but I also think we should at least know the cost before we make a motion to
But we
move
just heard
forward
the
with
cost.
it. Well, we heard the additional cost, but I'd certainly like to understand the personnel costs and how we're going to fund those.
Not to go too far out of that, but you're basically talking about 2 people out of the 3 career staff.
Okay.
The third one is not an intermediate and has no desire to be an intermediate. So you're talking 2 out of the 3 full-time people that are involved in that.
Okay.
So
Okay. All right, given that, then I don't have any reservations.
Okay.
How
Do I
many
have a s-
basic support personnel do you have?
basic, we have about 29 basic, between career and call.
So that's,
So there's about 28, 29 basic EMTs, 4 intermediates, and 4 paramedics.
so are most firefighters then?
The majority of the whole department, there's about 8 single-role EMTs, 8, or probably 6 single-role firefighters, and the rest are dual-role firefighter EMTs. All the career staff are firefighter EMTs. Karen's the administrative assistant. She also serves as a medic, so she helps us out in the ambulance. So that gives us an extra ALS person in the daytime, too.
Do I have a second to Mr.?
Yes.
You got one,
Phil,
okay.
sorry, Deb.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
It wasn't up there. No, it is. Let's say it's yours as well. Bless you. Thank you. Okay, current business, policies, social media, discriminatory harassment, and professional conduct.
So I've mentioned to you before that we are reviewing our existing policies, just to make sure that we are current, that we have policies on everything that we need to have policies on, and specifically that we have policies on items which Maya will give us credit for. So these 3 fall under that category. All of these policies are drafts from Maya, our insurance company, so they've reviewed them. Their legal staff has reviewed them. Our legal staff has reviewed these as well, and they've been reviewed by the departments which are affected. So the first one is the discriminatory harassment policy. May seem similar to a couple of policies that we brought to you a few weeks ago, but this one is specific to promote a workplace that is free of discriminatory harassment, provides a framework for identifying what types of behavior would be precluded under the policy, what the procedure is for an employee filing or wanting to file a claim. Let me see. There's one adjustment that we would make on the 3rd page. Under complaint procedures, it does specifically identify me by name and title, and we would take out my name. Obviously, this is something that is for the town manager, whoever he or she may be in the future, to comply with this. There's an investigation process that is outlined, and some mention about disciplinary action if there's a violation of the policy, and mention in the policy about state and federal remedies. Would you like to take them individually, or do you want me to go through all of them together?
Well, I don't think we're going to vote on them. I think I'd like to postpone the vote so we can introduce them here, review them, and then...
Okay. I would...
The other question I have, will these be replacing the policies within our policies in addition, or where are these going to be? Because we have, like, for instance, the first one, we have a sexual harassment policy in the Board of Selectmen policies, but I don't know if this also covers something else.
This would be more comprehensive than what you currently have. We'll review it against the existing policy, and if everything is covered in this, then I'll bring it to you and ask you to rescind that policy. But for the time being, these would be in addition to the policies that you currently have. I would ask that we put these back on for next week, because we're looking to have these approved by the end of May, if possible, in order to get credit for this fiscal year. And next week's meeting is your last one for the month.
The other general question on all these policies, you do address it on the social media about employees being paid employees versus volunteers or elected officials.
Yeah. So this one, I thought I highlighted. I mean, this policy is for employees.
What is this one?
Was this
The discriminatory harassment policy.
Okay.
Well,
So-
the question that I would have on that is does this apply to boards and commission as well? I mean, we have volunteers and elected officials who certainly could do something, that would be in violation of this policy. So that's one of the questions that I have, and I believe our sexual harassment policy specifically talks to that. So that's why I think it's important we look at the two policies in line, because my recollection is we specifically addressed that in our other policy.
Is there any particular reason you could cite why you believe that the discriminatory harassment policy would only apply to paid employees and not anybody who worked for the town on behalf of the town?
Yeah, the simplest
Well-
would be to have one policy that covers all of.
I guess I'll look into that. I thought this one specifically, I thought I had something highlighted where this one specifically.
Yeah, I thought I
this
read
is for the
something that said it did
protection.
cover that.
It's for the protection of employees. It doesn't say that that only employees, I'm not sure how to.
Yeah, our current policy talks about a working environment, right of employees. But I think this is clearly an employment-related thing, but I think we need to consider an additional one for non-employees that would be considered employees under other statutes.
Right.
I mean, some of that goes to the appointing authority's power to remove people from a committee that we may have appointed, and you often need grounds to do that, and if there is such a policy, you would have that already in place to cover that.
No, I guess I'm understanding what the town manager is saying. This is for the protection of employees, which certainly makes sense. But I guess, as Mr. Ebasol noted, I think it does make sense to have at least some section that relates to the conduct of elected and appointed officials.
Yeah, so I've made a note of that. I will look at this policy and the existing policy to make sure that we have something that would cover appointed officials as well, board and committee members.
And the same, I think, holds true on the social media policy. Because the purpose of this policy is to provide notice to employees of the town that their use of social media. Does that mean employee translate to officials and commission members? That's a question.
Actually, she addresses it in the third paragraph.
Yeah, this is, I
Actually,
think,
the second paragraph.
Okay.
Board and committee members are
Well, it's
responsible.
primarily focused on addressing employees. All town board and committee members are expressly reminded to proceed with the utmost caution.
Officials are in the terms, but I didn't find a reference to officials in the policy itself.
Where are the terms, Jamie?
Uh,
Oh, okay, on the third page.
Yes, C. C2.
And
Yeah,
then it says, board and committee members are responsible for their own adherence, governing open meetings, public records, and ethics.
Yeah, I think we need to go through these individually before next meeting and bring back any comments. Because I certainly think this applies to any individual that's acting on behalf of the town.
Right.
You know, having skimmed it, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And we have so many people who make the town work who aren't paid, you know?
Exactly.
And then just to make it clear to them of what the expectations are and are not,
Right.
as far
Right.
as official capacity as opposed to personal capacity.
Exactly, and I think it's very important that this policy be distributed to all those individuals.
So just to review this policy, the purpose is to provide notice to employees of the town that their use of social media must conform to the law and the policy. The policy is designed to promote and govern the professional and personal use of social media in a responsible manner, to avoid uses that can breach confidentiality, expose the town to legal liability, or interfere with the employee's productivity or ability to perform their duties. As was already mentioned, the policy is primarily focused on addressing employees' use of social media. All town board and committee members are expressly reminded to proceed with the utmost caution using social media. The policy provides information and sets parameters for acceptable use of social media. There's mention that there's no guarantee of privacy for electronic communications, that the town reserves the right to review and monitor electronic records and communications. It talks about supported social media and identifies supported social media sites as LinkedIn, Twitter, blogs, and Facebook. It talks about unsupported social media, mentions as examples MySpace, individual Twitter accounts, Friendster, Orkut, and unsupported blogs or message boards. So the intent is, you know, that or to encourage the use of social media, but to encourage its use in a responsible manner. There's information in here about how it should be used specifically. There's been a lot of questions. We have some departments that use Facebook, a lot of interest in using Facebook, but there are some pitfalls to that. As you probably all know, it's pretty easy to kind of get drawn into having a conversation, maybe expressing an opinion, maybe expressing an opinion when you're upset about something, and it's not so easy to take some of that stuff back. So it's important that while we need to be using these different types of media to get information out to people, because not everybody's reading the paper or watching the meetings or going to our website, because it's easier to look at something on Facebook because you're already there, that we need to be careful about doing that. And then the final policy is on professional conduct. Town employees are expected to act honestly, conscientiously, reasonably, and in good faith at all times. This is something I think that we have bits and pieces of this in different places. We have it in the salary admin plan, in individual employment contracts or collective bargaining agreements. There's some of it in the charter, but this was to capture it all in one place. So if you would take some time over the next week to look through that, if you have any questions, let me know, and I will do some checking specifically on the existing policies with regard to how they apply to board and committee members, and then we'll put this back on for next week.
Yes. And if anybody has questions, if they're large, kind of like town meeting rules, if they're large substantive changes, please communicate with the town manager in advance. Don't bring it in next Tuesday if we're looking to finish it. If it's just minor things, that's a different story. You can certainly bring those. But it would be our intention. I mean, two of these are pretty straightforward. The social media one is a little more extensive, but in length and breadth.
Looking at the professional conduct policy, that clearly just applies to town employees, but do we have something about officials as well?
Board of Selectmen one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's one for every single appointed body, but
It might be good to, not to hold this up for that part, but I think it'd be good, that seems like that could be adapted for committees as well.
You would think.
Right, and I do think, once we adopt them, it's important, very important, in my opinion, having tried to put together this document that has everything in it, that we incorporate these into the official policies and procedures book.
I think that's the intent.
So.
And the only comment on that would be just formatting, that the three of these have three different formats and stuff, and if we could be consistent with the format
Right.
that we already have.
Right, and I'm assuming that now that we have some staff available, that someone is going to take that on, and I can bow out. Okay, so if we can talk offline, make sure you have what you need to do that.
Yeah.
And I'll just note that our current policies are on our website. I just checked it, so it's great that it's there.
Okay, so here we have our homework for that for next week. Minutes. And warrants.
Fourth quarter water.
This is the fourth quarter commitment of our water department. And accounts payable in the amount of $1,496,109.42. Are these big transfers at some point? Usually something will walk. No, find it. And that noise is getting old. First one. That's what I thought. Okay. Action file issues. Anybody have any action file issues?
I would like to bring something up. I was thinking, I remember last year, following the elections, that the BOS reorganized, and I was hoping that we could create more liaison positions to town boards. I know that in particular, Park and Rec and Concom don't have liaisons, and I can't think of any others, but I thought that at that point, it would be a good idea to establish some, just, not that they necessarily have to go to all their meetings, but just to have a contact point, BOS to committees.
Well, so the reorg definitely happens. It happens it should happen actually next week, right after the election. That's usually when it happens. The appointing of liaisons is not part of the You can do that at any time.
Oh, okay.
So if there are liaisons that people want to make, I mean, I personally have commented that I think we should have one for the Conservation Commission. That's definite as far as I'm concerned. I don't know that we need one for the park, but I mean, as you said, people don't have to go. They could just be a contact point for the commission to know about. I think the ZBA is the other one that maybe we want to have somebody to, because they hear things that, because they're on zoning issues, sometimes they get things that attract a lot of attention.
Yeah, right.
And so it's good that to do nothing else than to report back to this board what's happening. But I think anybody, I mean, can be introduced at any time.
Okay.
No, I think it absolutely makes sense, and, you know, given we've just brought it up tonight, I think maybe that's something that should go on the agenda for next week as well.
Okay. And I also wanted to bring up that idea of a once a month coffee with committees, you know, even if what might not necessarily be the chair is just one interested person. It doesn't even have to be the same person every month. But when they talked about it at the municipal meeting in January, the person from Concord, where they have established this, said that it was very helpful. You know, people were able to know what was going on, and it improved cooperation and communication.
So what was the format in Concord?
It was a breakfast, you know, essentially coffee once a month, and at one morning a month. And I don't remember. I don't know whether it was a weekday or a Saturday, or it was just an opportunity for all the boards to go around and say what was happening on their board.
After the election.
And you know, I don't.
No, is it a Board of Selectmen in Concord? I don't even know. Is it?
Well, just one member from.
It's one member.
From every board, from as many boards as were willing to participate. And it wasn't necessarily a chairs meeting, it was just one member showing up to.
Okay.
It was kind of informal, I think.
I think it's worth exploring that.
I do
Just
too.
Another, you know, if we can get a little bit more detail on maybe how they do it. And
Yeah, I could contact
we could-
Concord and ask them more specifically what they do.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes we hear that we don't communicate and interact enough, so I thought, you know, it was a suggestion that they were very happy with.
You know, and even if we don't initially start with once a month, even if we do once a quarter or something, I mean, or
Yeah.
once every other month, but I would like to have more details on how they do it, and I think anything we can do to increase communication is a good thing. So I would love to explore that idea.
Okay, I'll get back to the person in Concord who brought it up in January.
Committee reports, Board of Health.
Board of Health met last week. One of in addition to the normal septic system and well location process, they met with the Agricultural Commission, dealing with the transition on the farmers market, making sure that they had all the information that related to what the Board of Health had to regulate for each of the individual vendors and what licenses they needed to get, and just to move forward. So I thought it was a good communication opportunity for them.
Excellent. Building reuse,
No report?
capital planning,
No report.
finance committee,
No report.
library board of trustees.
Library Board of Trustees had a meeting with members of the Green Committee to go over the process by which they can start to look at the lights inside their building. All the outside lights on the parking lot were changed to LED lights. They are trying to make sure that they have enough lights and but not too many lights. Basically, when they go in, everybody turns on every light, even if it's not necessarily needed. So they're going to be working on a process to identify which lights will be needed at which day and that type of thing. The library director sent out the report on the damage. They were going to have to replace the cork floor in the teen room. It turned out it was damaged more than they had expected. They've already posted the replacement for Kate, and they will need to do that for the other position that's leaving in July. They also went over, and they're going to be continuing to discuss when people come in to have petitions signed, whether it's somebody running for office, somebody trying to get signatures for ballot questions or other things like that. They have the ability to reasonably regulate it, not prohibit it, so that it doesn't disturb patrons. So they're figuring out what their policy is going to be on that.
Excellent. MPO.
The next MPO meeting is tomorrow at 1 o'clock at the Montezut Regional Planning Commission MART facility. One of the big items that will be on is the fiscal 2016-2019 TIP, and the plan is at 1:25 for a fiscal scenario review, and this is where the discussion will be about what is included for each fiscal year. So while there was a lot of attendance at the initial TIP kickoff, which Trish Domigan from VHB did a short overview of the Summer Street project. Tomorrow is when the discussion will happen about what projects will be included. And as I've mentioned, there are a few projects vying for the funding, so it's going to be an important meeting. And again, that's at the MART building at 1 if anyone's able to make it.
Planning Board.
The planning board met last night, and there were a couple of public hearings. There was a public hearing on 270 Electric Avenue, which is Rich Bursch of Lakeview is proposing some storage units. The board, had their initial review, and the hearing was continued to June 8th at 6:35. A couple things that came up were the traffic, and according to Jack Rodequins, via the applicant, it's considered a low traffic use. The snow removal came up, but basically the biggest issue that the planning board had was that the plans that were presented didn't show the elevations or the roof lines, so they're looking for some changes to the plan so they can get a better understanding of the elevations and the roof lines.
What is the actual?
270 Electric Avenue.
So
Is that at Lakeview?
where is that exactly?
I'm not sure.
I'm wondering whether it's the other corner.
I think it's where the storage of
Mulch.
and stuff is, I believe, but I haven't had a chance since last night to look at the map, but it's 270 Electric Avenue. Highfield Village was the continuation again on Highfield Village. They now have a new engineer on the project. The new engineer will be Whitman and Bingham. Jamie Rowe will now be working on the project. And the intent is to move forward as expeditiously as possible. They have a new attorney. His name is Paul Haverty, who was present last night. And he informed the board that they would be willing to renotice the hearing and then present the application via the new engineer. And what that will do is let the abutters know that about the hearing, and basically restart the process, but without withdrawing. And there was some discussion about whether or not that made sense and where that is legally. And but according to Adam Burney, the town council for Lunenburg as well as the applicant have talked, and I think this makes the most sense. So there will be a renotice. And one of the biggest concerns that members of the board expressed was the traffic counts, and they did talk about that, because the traffic counts that they're using are, the original traffic study was done in 2009 with data from 2007. And Ken Chenis actually had done some investigation with MRPC, and from 2008 to 2010, there's been an 11% increase in traffic on Chase Road and Northfield Road. So the concern, obviously, is that the data that they're using doesn't reflect today's traffic, given the new development. So the applicant indicated they would be willing to get new traffic counts. So the hearing was continued to September 14th at 6:35. So that will be going for.
There's no affordable housing component of that project, right?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so. Okay.
Well, I may want to take that back. I guess we should look into that. I'll look into that, because our bylaw requires that if you're building over a certain number of homes, that a percentage must be affordable.
Yeah, but if they applied under the old rules, then that doesn't apply.
Right.
That was added in the last, I don't know, 5 years, 4 years.
Certainly before the initial application. The action file, they went over economic development, which they do plan to restart now that the Village Center District is complete, so that will be on the front burner. They did briefly talk about the Ritter Building meeting room discussion, and they voted to send a letter to this board outlining their support of that meeting room renaming. They did briefly go over items for next year, and one of their top priorities will be to look at the uses and districts in the entire town and put a use table in place, which basically will make a user-friendly bylaw. That was Adam Burney's suggestion, and the board fully supports that and thinks it will make things a lot easier for anybody in town. As I stated, the economic development is an important component. They did talk about the parking bylaw, the parking sections, and they do want to try to clean that up and make it more conforming to other communities, and there's some cleanup work that needs to be done there. And they did briefly talk about signs and changing the sign bylaw, and they will be doing that at some point, but they want to focus primarily on some of the other tasks first. That was it.
Excellent. PAC,
No report?
School Committee.
The school committee met last Wednesday. Turkey Hill Middle School has presented their time capsule project. It's very cute. They're going to put a time capsule, and they're going to spend the next year deciding what sorts of things should be put in. And they reported that the school building committee has action items regarding patios, but that the school committee doesn't feel like they have any at this point, according to the meeting. But they do have an action to plan a workshop to discuss the capital planning request for a 10-year capital plan. I sent information to the superintendent on safe routes to schools. Luckily, the primary school is a safe routes to school partner, and there are grants available for putting sidewalks in. So I encouraged the superintendent or the principal to get on that grant through MRPC.
Right, and that's actually part of the tip, so they should initiate that project.
I agree.
Through the project, there's a project initiation form, a project need form, and then there's a project initiation form.
I got the contact information and
Okay.
sent it to them.
Okay.
School Building Committee meets tomorrow. That's on the site tomorrow.
Now, at the school committee meeting, they said that they were going to discuss the first change order under the construction contingency.
Yes.
Do you know what that will be?
I will report on it. I have the paperwork for it, but I don't want to
okay.
report on it until it actually happens at the meeting. So there were some change orders for plumbing, generally. But I will report on that next week.
As a follow-up to Mrs. Luck's report, I just have a question. I want to go back to what you said about the Building Reuse Committee, because I thought after the discussion last meeting that there was a meeting, and it was a great meeting, and they were going to look at what needed to be done as far as parking spaces and changing, and then they were going to go back and talk with, once a decision was made, they want to make that decision and then go back to MSBA all at once rather than doing it piecemeal. But I would have thought that that decision would have to be made by the school committee, not the school building committee. And I thought I just heard you say that the school committee does not feel they have an action item.
That's what they said at the meeting. Now, Greg Berthume wasn't there. Mike Mackin chaired the meeting, so maybe it was his misunderstanding.
Well,
But it surprised me, because after the last meeting, I was confused, too.
I don't understand the question.
Well,
Your understanding is correct, Mr. Bertram. The joint meeting between the Building Reuse and the school committee left an action item with, actually it was the combination of, because there was a representative from both the school committee and the school building committee. And they took the action item to go away and determine what it was they were going to propose to go to, or tee up the discussion so that they would only have to go to MSBA once.
mm-hmm.
and it was their action item. Now, when I say there, I'm not sure exactly which side it fell on, but they were going to work together and then come back.
Right, but the school building committee, certainly, I would not think anyway, doesn't have jurisdiction over the property. The only individuals who have jurisdiction over school property, I would believe, would be the school committee.
It's possible that the school building committee was going to recommend to the school committee based on their,
Because it requires going to it was brought up that they only want to go to the MSBA once. The school building committee is who would approach the MSBA, not the school committee. So, with the property and the property lines, that's certainly within the total authority of the school committee, although the school building committee certainly will be conferred, as was the building reuse. But the school building committee will be the ones to decide, okay, we have something now that we're going to go to the MSBA to say, okay, this is what we want to do because we only want to do this once. They frown on changes.
Right, but maybe I'm misunderstanding what Mrs. Luck just said, is that there was no action item for the school committee, and I don't know who's looking at it. I just want to make sure that someone is looking at it, as was discussed at the joint meeting, whether it be the school building committee or the school committee, or jointly, but that someone is putting together a plan and looking at the boundary lines
Yes.
and putting together a plan. Well, you say yes, but I'm hearing that the school committee said that there was no
As a
action.
member of the school building committee, I'm answering you yes. I can't answer for the school committee.
Okay.
But the
so-
whole goal is to get something that, first of all, it was all predicated on the village center district passing, which
Okay.
it did.
Okay.
So now there's something that's viable, because now there could be commercial things. If that had failed, then anything else would have been kind of moot to begin with. But now we'll put together and come up with agreement between the three committees, what would be a palatable property line distinction. And then the building reuse, without actually making it a formal, we're going to go out to an RFQ, or
RFP?
interest, request for,
RFI.
RFI.
is it an RFI?
Yep.
There you go. See, I just didn't sound right.
It's all right.
So then we'll go out with that and see what the interest is.
Okay,
With those property lines. If we get a good interest, then we'll say, okay, this is what we'll
Okay,
we'll use.
but I'm just trying to understand who's doing what. So the school building committee is looking at it, and they're going to make a proposal to the school committee? Is that the process that you envision?
Yeah, I think we're all going to be looking at it. The school committee's not going to have anything to do unless they make it permanent. Then they have the authority to say, we're going to make this permanent.
Well, I would
We're going to
certainly-
show everybody to see if everybody is in agreement in principle with these lines, so that the building reuse can advertise that and see what interest they have.
Okay, I'm just trying, Tom, all I'm trying to do is understand who's doing that, because this has been ongoing for a very long period of time, and the meeting was with the Building Reuse Committee and the school committee, and and I'm just trying to understand who is putting together that plan and looking at the parking spaces and looking at the lot configuration so that we can move this forward, that's all. So what I'm hearing you say is that the school building committee is doing that.
I will be bringing it up tomorrow during that meeting to discuss this. And they already had talks, the building reuse had talks with the school committee about doing that. So it's all three, the building reuse doesn't have any play, they're the ones waiting. So it's between the school building and the school committee itself. Those are the two that will come up with a plot line and say, okay, this is what we're proposing.
Okay. Okay.
And to take it further, I would see that with a request for information, interest, which would therefore get us an idea of who might be interested in the property. If there isn't anybody interested in the property or the uses or not, then it might come back to us for consideration of what are we going to do with that building,
Right.
assuming the school actually makes it surplus.
Right.
So.
I mean, what the school doesn't want to do is make anything official with breaking off the property if it's just going to sit there and then eventually could serve some purpose for the school in other campus buildings down in the future somewhere. So that's the concern.
No, I understand that, and it did come up at the planning board meeting last night that the, Nathan reported that there was some talk about not turning over the school property to the town. And, that was just a statement, and there were some comments from various board members on that. And I I hear what you're saying, that if we do an RFI and there's no interest, then obviously it doesn't make sense to cut off the piece of property. However, if there is interest, I want to facilitate that, because that was one of the things that at town meeting, when this came forward, when this new project came forward, was that this would be a way to offset some of the cost associated with the school and to help ease, to improve economic development in the town. So
Sure.
I just want to see it go forward, because we've been talking about this for a very long period of time, and it doesn't seem to me that we're moving forward.
I think it's gone at the pace that, well, I don't know that people expected, because I don't pretend to know people's expectations. But it's gone at the pace that, since I've been involved in the committee, that it said it would, that this is the pace it would take. So now that the Village Center District is there, now they can go, because without that, there was hardly a way to look at economic viability, because it would require zoning changes as well without the Village Center District being in place. So everything is happening.
Well, when I say that it's taken a long time, I know where the lot line was going to be on the Village Center District was a cause of angst for the planning board. And finally, they just determined that they were going to put a line, and that's what they did. But there was a lot of discussion between the Building Reuse Committee, the planning board, and members of the school committee on where that line was going to be, what made sense. And now that we have the line, it seems we have the line of the Village Center District, but we still don't have a line for the property. So if we could move that forward, that would be great.
Sewer Commission,
Sewer Commission had their meeting earlier tonight.
they came in just to hear your report.
That's right. That's right. Covering the status of the bidding status for Pratt Lakeview. I believe they made the award was approved?
Yes.
Okay. And that continuing to look at grease traps and compliance.
Excellent. Town manager reports.
Just one item to mention, the Senate budget was released today. I sent you something late this afternoon. It generally looks good. There's an additional, about $30,000 in additional Chapter 70 for the town of Lunenburg under the Senate's version of the budget. It's not been approved, it's just been released for discussion. It does include full funding of the Smart Growth 40S. It does not include a whole lot of funding for kindergarten grants. The House version of the budget that was passed fully funded the kindergarten grants. The Senate's version, I think fully funding it is something like maybe 18.6 million, and the Senate's version of the budget had 1 million. So that's a significant decrease.
Wow.
I'm not sure where that money went to in the Senate's budget.
That's quite the difference.
Well, in the governor's budget didn't have anything in it, and all of
That's what I meant to say.
all of the other line items for local aid. I mean, there's something going on outside of local aid where that money's going to, and I'm not sure yet. But everything else looked pretty good. I didn't get to look at the charges. They had them uploaded on the Department of Revenue's website, but everybody must have been trying to look at it because I couldn't pull up that page. So, sometimes we see increases in revenue and we get all excited, and we don't right away see all of the increases in the charges. I would expect that the charges are probably pretty similar, and meaning that the Senate's budget, except for the kindergarten grant, looks to be slightly more favorable to the town of Lunenburg. So more on that. They hopefully, they had to, I think, had until Memorial Day to release the budget. Maybe it's until Memorial Day to approve the budget, but we're getting close to the end of that process, and it's looking reasonably good.
When is the debate, do you know, on the floor of the Senate?
I didn't see that. I'm assuming that's starting probably next week.
Okay.
There was, in what I sent out, I think it was a plea to contact your senator to indicate support of the budget.
As all MMA releases are.
Yeah.
That it?
That is it, yep.
Any final public comment from the board?
I don't know whether it's public comment or just follow up on committee reports. Two things. One is at one point, we had met with the Green Community, I don't know what we call them now, the Green Energy Committee, and they had put forth a policy for individual buildings and having one individual appointed with, energy conservation measures. And one of the things I heard Mr. Ebersol mentioned was lights being on, et cetera. So I'm just wondering where we are with that policy. Have we implemented that? Have we circulated it to departments, or where we are with that suggestion?
Well, I think what we decided is that, at least on our side, we weren't going to have an individual person for each building. Our facilities department was going to manage that. The facilities department was involved in helping create the policy. They have a copy of the policy. Our facilities department right now is in a difficult situation with one of our staff members being out. So, we're really right now just handling the critical items. We expect to be back full staff for July 1st. So I would expect at that point we would be moving forward.
Well, given that the library is looking at things like lights being on, perhaps, I don't know, but it might make sense to circulate that policy to the librarians, because it's such a big facility that maybe it might make sense for them to use that at least for a starting point on looking at what lights should be on and how they manage, and just a suggestion.
If you could send it to me, I can bring it to the next library meeting.
We could at least share the suggestions that the Green Energy Committee came up with.
Actually, it's Green Community Committee. I take it back.
Okay.
Green Community.
So, I think they had some great suggestions in there, and that might be helpful to the library as they're going through this process. The other thing that I wanted to ask about was, at one point I had mentioned whether or not it's viable or not, I'm not sure, but looking at GIS services from MRPC for stormwater-related structures. Mm-hmm. One of the items on the MPO agenda tomorrow is the UPWP, or the Unified Planning Work Program, task review. And I know you were going to reach out to MRPC and talk with someone about that, and I don't know if you've had an opportunity to do that, but that's one of the items on the agenda tomorrow, and if it's something I should bring up,
I think it was 2 weeks ago, Jack Rodriguez and Adam Burney met with MRPC to talk about this. They developed a scope of work. I had asked to get that in writing so I could share it with you. I don't have that yet, so I will follow up. But I know based on that meeting, there was work that MRPC could do for us and was willing to do for us.
If it's something, I don't know the scope, but if it's something we can do under the UPWP rather than at a cost to Lunenburg, obviously that would be our first option. And so if there's any way I can get at least some type of information on what Adam's looking at, what Jack's looking at, so that I can talk intelligently to it tomorrow at the meeting, I would need it before noon tomorrow, so.
Okay, I'll look into that. The meeting was specifically to talk about what MRPC could do for us under UPWP, and not
Okay.
something that we were going to pay for.
Okay. If there's any way I can get any information before the meeting, that would be great.
And the only question I have, now that town meeting's over and everything that got put on hold, I realize can't all get started up right away, but the status of the traffic rules and regulations, of where we are with that.
The signs, you mean?
No, reviewing.
The rules and regulations. Yeah.
That at the meeting that we had with the moderator and town council before town meeting, the police chief asked town council about the status of that and was told that it was on hold until town council gets through town meetings, not just Lunenburg's
Right.
town meeting.
I didn't know. Okay, good, thank you.
Any other public comment from the board? 2 announcements. You'll be receiving the town manager evaluation form in email. We will obviously go through this process again. Unfortunately, we'll go through the process with the same forms again.
Oh, no.
So when you get them, please, this should be done. if you get them this week, I wouldn't mind you starting to make your appointments with the town manager to meet with her. And if we can get it done by the end of the month, and then we can present it at our first week in June, first or second meeting in June, so I can collate everything. So just keep that in mind, that time frame. Any public comment from the public? We do have an executive session. And it is a joint executive session with the sewer commissioners pursuant to Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Sub 9, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the government's bargaining or litigating position, and the chair so declares it. This is a discussion of Lunenburg versus Howells Hills LLC and HAC. We will not be returning to public session. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn to executive session, not to return to regular session.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, Mrs. Luck?
Aye.
Mr. Ebersol?
Aye.
Mr. Toll?
Aye.
Mrs. Bertram?
Aye.
And aye for me. Good night, everyone. We'll see you next week.